Hey everybody, Braden here. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be covering my 101st ever tournament game. And now that we've hit 100, as you can see, there is now a timer on the boards as well. This is just to show how much time we had left. It doesn't show increment or anything, but generally it gives a good enough indication of what the time control was at the time. Just as an addition. But alright, let's get into the game. After the last one, again, I took it pretty seriously where I was playing way too quick. This time, I tried to slow it down a little bit. And I slowed it down in an interesting way. I realized maybe I should try something a little different to mix it up, and also, because if I mix it up a little bit, it'll make me think right out of the opening. I think one of the things that one should worry about. I don't recommend this necessarily in classical chess, but I do recommend it if you're playing like rapid or if you're trying things out. If you try a new opening, generally you're going to find yourself immediately spending quite a bit of time to try to figure out what the plans are. So sometimes if you're trying to break a habit, you need to let go of the things you were already doing altogether, and then you can reintroduce them later. So let's see what I mean. I play e4. Neil plays c5. Knight f3. d6. d4. c takes d4. Knight takes d4. Knight f6. Knight c3. And now the Najdorf. Last time I played bishop g5. Round 1. This is round 4. And we're already going to see a pretty big difference. I did not play bishop g5. I did not play bishop e3. I did not play bishop e2. I did not play f3. I did not play h3. I played, well, let's just see how uncommon the move is. Bishop e3 is the most common according to the live database. Bishop g5 next, bishop e2, bishop c4, h3, f4, f3, g3, a4, bishop d3, and knight b3. It was none of those moves. And the reason why I wanted to bring this up is because I think it's kind of funny, honestly. None of these moves were played. G3, A4, bishop D3 as well, and then knight B3. All right. So if none of these moves were played, what did I play? I played rook G1, and I played rook G1 because, well, this is a line. Mamadurov played it, has played it. Nepomniachtchi has played it. It's actually quite reasonable. Let's talk about the ideas. The idea is simple: g4, g5. And if we play g4, g5, first off, when we see rook g1, we're castling long. We're not casting short anymore. It's impossible. And it has similarities to h3. Generally, the h3 lines have been really trodden out, and most Najdorf players know these lines quite well. And that's why I opted for rook g1. But alright, after rook g1, e5 was played, knight b3, and then bishop e6. So I was out of book already, and now I'm not, but at the time I was. And the reason why I was is because, well, what do I do here? There's a lot to ask. Generally, the best idea is g4, and what will happen is d5 takes, knight takes, queen takes, bishop takes, bishop e3. This is a very, very well-known line. Castles long, castles long. We can play bishop e6 and something like rook g3 and g5, bishop e6. This is just an example line of how the game would probably continue. It's not the most amazing thing we've ever seen, right? Like, it feels like black should be okay. But you can argue maybe there's a little bit of something we can push. The thing is, generally, as far as top theoreticians feel about the Najdorf, it's hard to pose practical problems against it. So the idea here was simply to play something that, well, a lot of people wouldn't prepare against, rook g1. And if they know this line, then yeah, they probably do quite okay. But of course, not everybody's going to play that. However, I didn't know this idea of going g4 anyways, because g4 I saw d5 and I saw this ending and I thought, let's be more ambitious. So I played bishop g5, which isn't as good, because bishop e7, queen d2, and yeah, maybe something like g4 makes a little bit more sense here. H6, bishop d2, knight c6, and queen f3. And we'll enter a position like this, which looks pretty interesting. And yeah, it's very unclear what's going on here, because, well, we have ideas of queen e4, for example, and we can see a lot of activity for white, but also black is, it looks like black's doing pretty okay as well. So that's just something to note here, that these lines get very, very, very intriguing very easily. But my opponent didn't do that, or I didn't do that as well. I didn't play g4. I played queen d2, just a normal developing move. What I was scared of is some sort of taking on e4. But I think we can successfully take back on e4. And the problem is, if they take, we can at least take on d6. And even if we don't take there, maybe we can take on g5 and then take on d6 here. Both seem to be fine. These are important things to know. Is that generally taking on e4, if we can meet it with taking on d6, then that's going to be okay for us. But alright, I played queen d2 because I didn't see these things. Knight bd7, I castle long. We see b5. And then I played a move that I thought was tricky, and I was hoping that my opponent would fall for something. And that's the move a3. I think this is a very interesting move. The idea is bishop takes b3 is not really appropriate here. A better move is probably f4. And we don't want to go f5 here. But what would happen is we'd play something like g4. And I wasn't sure how to evaluate something like this. This does look reasonable. You know, they do have the weak d6 pawn, but we also have a potentially weak e4 pawn. Generally, I'm a little bit less comfortable here as white. So I thought a3 would be promising, because it's very natural to want to take this knight on b3 and weaken our structure a little bit. But I think it's incorrect, and my opponent actually does it. C takes b3, knight c5. And the problem here is that we can just defend everything properly and comfortably with queen c2. And what's going to happen here is eventually we're going to play king b1, maybe even king a2 at some point. But definitely king b1, rook c8 was played, so we can't play king b1 yet. Yeah, some sort of like king b1, maybe take on f6, and then we're going to get a knight on d5. And that's kind of like a dream scenario for us, versus this bishop. So that's what happens. Rook c8, and we can't play king b1 yet, because taking on e4 is a problem, where this rook is pinning the knight to our queen. So instead, I take on f6 here. And now, after bishop takes f6, now we can play king b1, because if knight takes e4, we can take with our queen, which is a big deal. Knight e6 was played. And I played b4, which is inaccurate. Instead, queen d3 is better. Just going for the immediate knight d5. This is actually very important to get in. It's a very good move. And it has some key tricks with it. For example, bishop g5 is tempting. But there's always moves like f4, which make it extremely uncomfortable to play, because now we're trying to undermine their strongest piece, their knight on d4. Alright, so instead I played b4 here, preventing them from playing any sort of b4s in the future. We see knight d4, and then queen d3. Oh, and then as knight d4, and then queen d3. And black makes a blunder here. Bishop e7, and yeah, they should have just castled instead. This is much more natural, and then they can eventually go with some sort of like a5 and b4 and try to even sacrifice against us. But bishop e7 is very cooperative, because it encourages us to play moves like g4. Bishop e, bishop e7, knight d5 is also quite promising as well, with the idea of f4. And since the bishop's not on f6, it feels like f4 is actually even a little bit stronger here. And we're just going for a kingside attack, and it feels like our kingside attack is much further along than theirs. But okay, bishop e7, g4. And the idea here is I was trying to provoke something like this, where I have f4 as a threat after knight d5. Like, for example, if they castle, f4 is a bit of a problem, where they can't take it. And if they can't take it, and then they go back, then, you know, g5 comes as well. Eventually this knight, like, we're just trying to take advantage of the misplaced knight. Because it wasn't misplaced originally, but now it definitely does feel misplaced. So that was the key idea here. But after g4, my opponent played g5. Which isn't really such a great idea, because this bishop is not really so active. And we can argue that maybe white's light square bishop is also pretty inactive. But I think there is a pretty key difference in that our king is safe on b1, whereas they don't really have like b8 as a return. And we always have sacrifices like h4 in the position if they ever castle short. So I played knight d5, and then we see rook c2, which is a interesting move. I didn't really think that this was great, because if we just ignore it, eventually it feels like it's going to actually have to move away. And queen e3 forces the rook to move away now, like rook c6 or rook back to c8, because we have a threat. But my opponent missed the threat here and played h5, and now white is winning. And after my next move, my opponent ends up resigning. So white to move and win. Okay, so the move is rook takes d4. And the point is that this rook here is now no longer defended. And it's important to notice that after taking on d4, takes d4, there's no bishop f6, because we can take that and still take on c2. And the rook is hanging in the corner. So this is actually just a double attack right now. And because of that, the game is over. So that's why after h5 and rook takes d4, my opponent ends up resigning here. So this was a fun one to win, because it was a weird one. This was not something I was used to, like these types of structures and these types of positions. But it did encourage me to want to play more rook g1 Najdorfs. Let me just say that. So that's how the game went. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you all in the final round, round 5 of the Hamilton Summer Open. Have a good one. Bye-bye.